Hello, this is Whatcast. I am Matt. Just wanted to come on today and do a quick review. I was watching on Netflix the Mr Mcmahon documentary about Vince McMahon, the wrestling promoter. Now, I was interested in this because I was always such a massive fan of wrestling back in the day. Not so much in the last sort of 10 years, but around the rise to prominence of this guy. And amid all of the accusations that have come out over the last year or so, I thought this, from what I was hearing, from what people were saying, this was going to be shocking, a biggest hit piece in Netflix history, really hard hitting, staggering, stunning, and all this. I don't think it was any of those things, right? I'm going to get into why. I'll talk you briefly through what was in it, the main points. So obviously won't drag on and tell you because people might want to watch this. There's not really going to be, you can't say spoilers because there's nothing to spoil. The story is there. I'm not sure you're going to find out much. If you've followed the wrestling business, you'll know most of the stuff that's in this documentary. Anyway, if you've always been kind of like a bit of a casual fan, you'll probably get the most out of it, to be fair. If you're fully aware of who everybody is, all of the talking heads in the video are, I mean, the things come up telling you who they all are anyway. There's quite a lot of them. The Rock's on there, Steve Austin's on there, the McMahon family are on there. Tony Atlas is on there quite a lot. There's Dave Meltzer, who's like an insider in the wrestling business, always has been around with his Wrestling Observer and whatever. So he's always kind of like on the inside of it, and they'll hate him for it and make out he's talking crap and all that sort of stuff. Bret Hart's on there. There's quite a lot of, I'm probably missing a lot of people, but I'm just trying to kind of get through this and tell you exactly what they was all talking about. So it's quite interesting to hear people's different points of view. But I'll get to my criticisms later. I'll tell you what's what first with what I enjoyed and didn't enjoy about the documentary, which is 6 parts, by the way. So if you're going to be invested into it, I might give you a few tips how to get through it a bit quicker, to be honest. But so it starts off with McMahon kind of hobbling into a ring to sit down. You know when they do that thing where they put the chair there, that empty chair, and then suddenly someone appears and sits in it? Like when these documentaries, like the person that's about to speak has entered the building. Well, that they did that with Vince, and he sat in the ring, and he looked very frail, to be honest, right? Very frail. And he sat down and immediately said that I'm not going to tell you much. I'll give you enough to be vaguely interesting. So, like, he's already saying, I'm going to withhold loads of information in this documentary. And this is when he was going along with it. Bearing in mind, I've got a better point out. This interview was apparently from 2021 with Vince McMahon and everyone else, really. I don't think anything was recent on it. And obviously, he wouldn't have agreed to do it if he knew what was going to come out and what was going to happen. So, obviously, if you're hoping to see him squirming on the spot about the alleged sexual allegations, etc., that have come out since, you're probably not going to enjoy this because he doesn't really speak about it. It's kind of all done beforehand. So anyway, it does a usual thing with a documentary. It paints the story of his life. So like he's one of these, it's one of them American dream stories that, I grew up on a trailer park and, I had to learn to be tough from a young age because we didn't have no money. And you hear this story a lot of time. And I don't know why he wasn't with his dad, who was quite rich. He was with his abusive mum and her abusive dad, her abusive husband or whatever. And he was claiming, obviously, he's been sexually abused as a child and abused and all this sort of stuff he was coming out with. There's always that story behind. Whenever you get a fucked up person, they've usually got that kind of history, and this is no exception. His dad, his biological dad, was a wrestling promoter. If you're into wrestling, you'll know all of this stuff anyway, but I'm just going to touch on it all. And he, eventually bought the WWF, off of his dad. And took it nationwide because there was regional territories back in the day, and in the northeast it was the WWF, and they all promised each other that they wouldn't come onto each other's territory and take over and put any shows on in each other's. It's like the unsaid thing, and when McMahon Jr. come along and took over from his dad, he just went nationwide with it and brought up everybody else's talent. And basically his attitude was, fuck everybody. Literally says it on here. Fuck them. I don't care. I'm a businessman. And you can't really knock him for that. You can knock him for a lot of things because he's a total prick, right? And I always found this about him as well. Like when I was a kid and when I used to watch wrestling, even as an adult, I used to watch wrestling. And it's one of those, it's the weirdest thing in the world, wrestling. If you watch wrestling, you're fully aware that it's predetermined and scripted and entertainment. Everybody knows this. But every wrestling fan speaks like no one else that watches it thinks this. Like he thinks that everyone else thinks it's real. So they should do this, this, and this to get the reaction from those people that all think it's real. Nobody thinks it's real, right? And I never, ever thought it was real. But I was always massively entertained by it, even as a kid. And you do suspend your disbelief to watch this because it was such a spectacle, especially like the WrestleManias and this sort of thing that this guy created. But I always remember as a kid watching it and his ridiculous voice coming on at the beginning of all of the big shows and stuff. Welcome to WrestleMania! And just sitting there, like if I'm watching with my dad or something, I would just sort of sit there and be like, "Oh, fuck off, Vince!" Like I want my dad to understand why I like this, and you got this prick coming on with this fucking voice. It was just so weird and cringe. It just really, really used to just take me out of it. It's like, and his commentary was very weird because they pretended for some reason, I don't know why. They pretended that he was a commentator. Like they pretended that he didn't own the company, that he was just a commentator that just commentated on the matches, and he was just a nobody that got bullied around by the wrestlers. Hold on a minute, swig of tea here. So they were trying to paint him in a bad light about buying up all the territories and becoming a millionaire. And buying everyone else's talent, just offering the wrestlers more money. All of the wrestlers was established in their area, was known on TV in their area, was local stars, and he took them all to one place. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's business. Loads of people do that. It then went on to like him needing a big star to go worldwide and finding, not finding because he was already established. His dad had fired Hulk Hogan because Hulk Hogan took a job on Rocky III. And his dad thought, if you take that job, you never work here again. And he took the job, and his son gave him the job back. And it was kind of like a telling the tale of how he needed this big, larger than life figure to take it national and international and have this big kind of bodybuilder freak kind of face of the company that he needed. And then Hogan's got a job, work with the A-Team. Mr. T's got on board. Cyndi Lauper's got on board. All of these big Muhammad Ali, all of these big stars created this first WrestleMania, and basically they're off and running because of this guy's vision that he apparently gambled on. Gambled all of his money to do this. He's literally, you start to then see like aspects of how ruthless he is and how he don't give a fuck about anybody. Other than making money, and he working these guys to the bone like 300 odd days a year. They're like actually having wrestling matches. I know everyone's like, oh, it's fake, they don't touch each other. They literally do touch each other. Like it's very, very physical, very, very painful. That lots of these guys ended up on painkiller addiction and all this. So many of them died in their 30s and 40s from this era, from this time when they was working so hard because he just wouldn't give them a night. They wanted to take a night off. It's like you lose your spot with the company, you lose all your money, and they couldn't make this kind of money anywhere else. They were just like wrestling before Vince McMahon came along was like there was no money in it really, unless you was a massive star of the area. Then you got reasonably paid, but these guys were making astronomical money in comparison to what they'd been making before, so they just had to do it because it's like it's a short career. in comparison to like things that are not physical. Like your body's only got so much in it, especially the grind they're putting it through, and they didn't want to do it every day, and they just ever wanted to just go home and get some time off, but they very rarely ever got any time off, and he's just like literally didn't care, didn't know favors. You do it or you don't do it, or you're finished. A guy called Jesse Ventura then tried to start. I mean, you might have heard of him. He was an ex-wrestler, became a commentator, was like a big voice and name in this time and with the rise of this company. And he's tried to unionize. He's tried to call all the wrestlers together and create a union. And Vince has told everybody, if you go to that union meeting, you're all fired. So no one went to the union meeting. So he doesn't want nobody. He didn't want anyone to have a union, anyone to have any power, any kind of retirement plan, or any kind of money. He just was like, I'm making all the money right now. Come with me or die, kind of thing. Jesse, by the way, was the only one that came away from this era with any kind of morals, any kind of integrity intact, because he walked out on the company numerous times to do things, to be his own man, and then he went on, by no surprise, to become the governor of Minnesota. When you listen to him these days, he's like he's lost the plot a bit. But I always quite enjoyed listening to him, especially his conspiratorial stuff and everything like that. He's walked some of it back now since COVID, let's say. But he was quite interesting with the 9/11 stuff and everything else that he used to come out with, considering the positions that he held. It was quite credible. We then see, and this is exactly what I was talking about with Vince from when I was a kid, and listening to his drivel that he come out with and the way he spoke and this ridiculous over-the-top shit that he did, which I guess worked. I mean, it's not... Who am I to sit and knock him? He became a billionaire, for fuck's sake. But him singing Stand Back. Now, I actually remember this song. There was this is how long I was a fan for. In the late 80s, they brought out there's a second wrestling album. And this was on it. And there was something called the Slammy Awards, where all of the wrestlers got Slammies for best dressed and best manager and stupid categories. It's a ridiculous over the top night where they all got these bullshit awards. But obviously the whole thing was in a show. I think it was at Atlantic City, I believe it was. And there was lots of live performances. And one of the live performances was Vince Mcmahon singing Stand Back. And if you know Vince McMahon, if you're a casual fan of wrestling, if you've got knowledge of this, if you're not a casual fan, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're a casual fan of wrestling and just got a passing interest, and you think that, or you've just come into this documentary because you want to get some dirt on him because he's an evil billionaire or whatever, for a laugh, just go and Google Stand Back Vince McMahon and watch this live performance of this prick swinging his coat around with all of the wrestlers in the background playing the instruments. Like cringe, you can see the cringe on their face that they have to do this because he's paying their wages. Hulk Hogan on the guitar in the background. And like Jake the Snake and fucking Macho Man and all these people playing trumpets, and it's the worst, just the worst. They then go on about the continued rise, WrestleMania 3 and everything else, which was, I probably watched WrestleMania 3 600 times when I was a kid. It was like my ultimate, it's probably the first wrestling show I ever watched, and I absolutely loved it. So there's a bit of nostalgia there watching this. They went on to the steroid trials. So this guy, there was a doctor, Dr. Sahorian, that would supply all of the steroids became illegal, and he would supply all of the wrestlers with steroids to look good, basically, because obviously they're illegal as performance enhancing drugs. But at this point, wrestling hadn't come out as not legit. You can't enhance your performance on a predetermined thing. So I'm not really sure what was going on and why it was illegal, but they ended up, everybody was taking steroids basically in the 80s in wrestling. And they was all buying them for inflated prices from this guy, Zahorian. and Vince McMahon ended up getting in a lot of trouble for it and was probably going to go to jail if it was found that he was the one supplying the wrestlers with steroids, because there was a lot of wrestlers getting ill at this point because it had been going on a few years and coming out against him, and it was kind of blaming him the same way that like that woman tried to blame McDonald's for being fat. It was that kind of thing, right? But he didn't actually supply him. It was the doctor. But obviously he was very aware of it, taking him himself, obviously. And Hulk Hogan's coming out again, I never took him, like because he's the clean American guy. And they came out with one thing I didn't know about, and that was that, like, basically the head of NBC at the time was on there. She was one of the people talking, and she said that that they would have taken WWF at the time off of the air if he'd have gone to jail, because it's such a stigma attached. It would have come off of the air. So I don't know. They wouldn't have any TV. They probably wouldn't be wrestling now. How things could have changed. And ironically, they got Hulk Hogan in to testify against him, and Hulk Hogan did testify against, because by this point Hulk Hogan had left the company. They was no longer working together. He was working for a rival company, and he testified that he never got steroids from Vince McMahon, so therefore he kind of got off. They then went into, like, they skipped a few years and whatever, and there was this ring boy stuff that I remember from the early 90s. It was just getting massive in this country. I actually went to Wembley Stadium to watch SummerSlam, the first pay-per-view event that they had in this country. And by this point, all of the pay-per-views were free in this country. Like, it was so weird. And they was like, until sort of 1990 or something, they was 2 months behind with the wrestling. But the world was so much bigger then. America was this faraway place that you'd never go to, and the internet didn't exist. So if you was 2 months behind with TV, you didn't know that you was, other than when magazines started to come in. You're like, hang on a minute, this is telling me stuff in the future. Like, but we just got with it. But it was just getting big over here. And I remember my dad saying to me, oh, fucking all the wrestling you watch, they're all gay and all this. There's this stuff coming out about these. Why'd you watch that shit? Blah, blah, blah. And I think, oh, yeah, I wish he'd, because he used to watch it with me sometimes. But then Vince McMahon would come on with his voice, and he'd be like, oh, God, please go away. But they had ring boys setting up the ring. And there was Mel Phillips was a ring announcer. And he would, like, basically ask for favors from it was basically a pedo, like a fucking pedo nonce, right? And there was Terry Garvin, was a wrestler. He was gay. Pat Patterson as well was a gay wrestler, old wrestler. He wasn't current at the time. They was, like, retired or whatever. But they were named as well and all this stuff, so they all got fired. Vince, I didn't know anything about this. Like the way that Vince will always come out with things that he was clean and he didn't know anything about it. I thought I wanted them to talk more about that, because I remember that story at the time, but I didn't learn anything else more about it by watching this documentary, other than what the allegations were. And ultimately, Pat Patterson got rehired straight back anyway, even though loads of the wrestlers, including Tony Atlas in this documentary, was claiming that he grabbed his cock in the dressing rooms and he couldn't do anything about it because it was Pat Patterson, so who are you going to tell? And he was like laughing when I was saying, go and tell Vince McMahon. He was laughing and saying, well, what good would that do me? He would just turn a blind eye to it, which you can believe, right? They've then gone into, excuse me, they've gone into 2 episodes of like a wrestling documentary of the history of wrestling. Like this thing, one of the main problems with this documentary was it wasn't about Vince McMahon. Why am I zooming in and out like that? It's really annoying when the camera can't figure out what it's doing. It wasn't really about the corruptness of him or the evil genius or any of this other shit. It was more about the company and the wrestling business, which if you're not into the wrestling business, you don't give a fuck about. And if you are, you know. Like, you don't need to be told the chronological order of the events and of the eras of wrestling. Like, you know. So it was like, they could have just done away with episode 3 and 4, basically. It was just the rise of Attitude Era and the Montreal screw job. which has been spoken about forever. And it's really silly as well when you actually. It was this big thing in wrestling where Bret Hart was supposed to lose his title on his way out the door because he was moving to the rival, the WCW, and they told him it would be a disqualification, and instead they made him submit, like by telling the ref just to ring the bell and pretend he'd submitted, which is all bullshit. Like nobody believes it's real anyway. So I don't really know what the fuss was about, why they snuck around so much, why Bret Hart got so pissed off about it to this day. Still going on about it on there, and he was Bret Hart was a fantastic wrestler to watch, even though it's all bullshit. His matches did look very real, and he was fantastic and quite a level-headed guy to speak as well. He was never a shatter, and it was never embarrassing to watch. And I appreciated those sort of wrestlers because most of them were embarrassing to watch. But he still goes on about it. Vince McMahon, and he ended up punching Vince McMahon and like legit punching him, knocking him out in the dressing room. But this story's been told a million times, but they put it in here for filler. McMahon having his little knocks at Bret on this in his interview, trying to pretend that like he would have beat him up if other people wasn't there and all. It was drivel. They speaking of Hearts, they then not then. I'm missing quite a lot here because I would speak about it for ages. I don't really want to go into the whole thing because there's a lot of nonsense. And not enough about Vince, as I keep pointing out. They went into the death of Owen Hart. If people don't know this story, Bret Hart's brother Owen Hart was also a wrestler, and he was doing this ridiculous gimmick. It was a joke gimmick where he was like a superhero, and he was coming down on a harness from the rafters, and it gave way. And he fell to his death in the ring in the middle of a show and like hit the corner and died. And like they carried on the show. And I remember watching this show at the time and I'm just thinking, I remember coming home from work and my mum said to me, some wrestlers died, Owen Hart. And I was like, what the fuck is she talking about? And I'd back the day, VHS, I had it recorded and I went and watched it. And I was like, I couldn't believe what I was watching. And I couldn't believe they carried on. And they pretend that Vince does this thing on it. Just shows what sort of a person he is. Where he does this thing where it's what Owen would have wanted. It's what they would have wanted to carry on this show. Really? I think if I dropped dead at my work and they kind of carted my body away and all carried on as normal, I think my family might be a bit offended by that. I don't. It's not what I would have wanted. Yeah, the show must go on. Keep making shit. It's a stupid thing to say, and it's a way that he literally didn't want to refund everybody because he's a tight fuck, and he put money into the show, and so he just pretended that the right thing to do to honour Owen's memory was to continue the show. He got lawsuit after lawsuit from Owen's wife and stuff about this, and they go along. He basically pretends that that he wasn't to blame. Like, at least look back and say, yeah, you know. Like, apparently they'd done a stunt beforehand where he came down on this thing and it took ages to release and it was very slow. I want it faster, I want it more dangerous. I don't care, if it's dangerous. And went with this stupid company, apparently, that you couldn't really trust to make the harness and to the quick release. The quick release just failed and released immediately with some pressure. Anyway, the show must go on is how he justified it. Bizarre. Chris Benoit, if you're familiar with him, he was a wrestler. They went into this a bit later. That basically killed his family. He killed his young son, his wife, and then himself in like a triple murder-suicide. And when they're talking about this on there, and again, Vince, not my fault. And it probably isn't because he wasn't always his promoter. He worked for lots of different companies, even in Japan and all this sort of stuff. But the way that they just deny, including Steve Austin sitting there denying that this thing is real, CTE, I think it's called, with your brain. Its brain had basically turned to mush with all the concussions, the chairs, the headbutts, everything else that fake wrestling causes you these problems. And they're basically denying that it had anything to do with it. Well, not really that it's anything to do with it, but they was basically saying that it could. McMahon's words was something along the lines of people just go crazy sometimes. Like basically nothing to do. Even though when they took his brain out after he died, they see that he had an Alzheimer, a brain of a 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient or something. Even though he was like in his 30s. But apparently that was nothing to do with the wrestling business. That like, I'm nutshelling a lot of this. There is more meat on the bones of a lot of these topics. But the point I'm trying to get across is it's kind of a history of the scandals in wrestling. And it takes long periods away or long periods of praising him, of praising Vince McMahon for his achievements and for how he, like, which is fine. He's made lots of achievements. He's made lots of people some happy memories of watching this over the years and etc. But they have sold it like it is a scandal fest documentary that cannot be missed to get the dirt on this guy. And really, they give him a right to reply way more than the accusations are, if you know what I mean. Like he gets to talk his way out of everything, to the point that it's arguable that he's got a point when he probably fucking hasn't in most of these cases. They finally, in the last episode, they finally get on to the Janelle Grant stuff, which is the woman that with the NDA that he got the NDA with, gave her loads of money to keep quiet, basically. And she's come out of all these allegations, like shitting on her head and forcing her to have sex with this person, that person, whoever he chooses, John Laurinaitis and these other head office bods from there. And it basically just runs over everything that you've already read. I didn't really learn anything that I didn't know. They showed some of the texts, which were fucking disgusting, which he denies writing, but clearly wrote. And yeah, it's basically a long-winded build-up to a story that's about a year old to be retold. I guess if you don't know who he, if you didn't know who he was, before that scandal made worldwide news, then it gives you a background into who he was, and it might be quite interesting, but it's probably not. Because if people don't know who he is and they've got no interest in wrestling, the documentary is far too wrestling-centric and showing you the evolution of the business from era to era and showing you key matches and giving you how The Rock come to prominence and Stone Cold Steve Austin and some of these other people. It's not fucking relevant to the guy you're actually making a documentary or pretending the documentary is about. Like if this wasn't entitled Mr McMahon, he would probably come across as just another one other than the first episode and a bit. He would probably come across as just another voice, the same as everybody else, that's just popping up and giving their opinion on something that's just been described. So I don't really. Obviously, he's a bit more prominent in it than other people because it is about him, but not in the sense like if you was talking about like a serial killer. When you see these other documentaries and they're talking about a serial killer or something like that, it's very clearly about that person. This is about that. They go on a big tangent about WCW, which he didn't even own, and their rise, and it's weird. It was just very strange. I've got down here, like, overall, it spends most of its time being the history of the WWF, and that's what it is, right? They go on a little bit about what changed from WWF to WWE with the Panda, like the World Wildlife Fund and all that sort of stuff. And all of these people that gave me hope, really, the people that were close to Vince McMahon in his company. They've all been complaining about how it's too harsh on him and it's a hit piece and it's terrible and it doesn't give him right. I don't think it was hard enough on him at all, really. Like he sounds by all accounts, anyone that knows him, yes, he's created lots of opportunity. Yes, he's made a lot of millionaires. I'm sure people owe their entire lives to him and his vision. And he's been there. They've been his stars, and they're not going to speak against him. And you kind of get it, even of all the horrible things he's done. It's almost a bit fingers in the ears, la 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 la. Yeah, there's nothing proven. It's just allegations or whatever. But even if all of those allegations are false, this is still a weird old prick, right? That's a very selfish, that admits to numerous affairs over the years, that admits to screwing loads of people over, that admits to being a very selfish individual. And he doesn't really get his feet held to the fire with this. Yeah, so that was so in closing then, I guess I've kind of covered it all speaking about it. It's you could probably completely skip if you know wrestling, even to some degree, even back then, like me. You can probably skip episode 3 and 4 and not really miss anything if you just want the juicy scandal stuff. Because this is what we want from a documentary. We want the scandal. If you're going to put it like that and you grab a picture of this puppet master with wrestlers and he's like, this is me and I'm this evil face in all the red background and everything. And then you're literally going to say, Vince Mcmahon did this. What do you think about that, Vince? Well, I did that because I had a family to feed and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, yeah, I suppose. Like, it's kind of fucking pointless. We want scandal. Anyway, that'll do for now. Please watch it if you want to watch it. I've kind of broke it down for you here. If you don't want to watch it, I don't know. Let me know what you want in the comments anyway. Let me know what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? I'm sure there's going to be comments. Who knows? Sometimes no one even watches my YouTube videos. Sometimes I get thousands. Sometimes I get single digits. So if you have watched to the end, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think of my assessment. If you've watched it yourself, if you haven't, let me know if you're going to now after listening to this. I'm sure that if the comment section people do come along, then there will be other people giving it, well, you're not an expert and you said this wrong and all that sort of shit that they come out with. That's fine too. Please correct me on anything I got wrong. Cheers. Adios for now.